Hey there, this is Paul, and I've just finished up my first full character demonstration map in the Starcraft II Editor. Ezreal is probably my favorite attack damage carry in League of Legends right now, and his abilities are pretty flashy, so I thought it would be a good example to see what the editor was actually capable of. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the map here, and while it's doing that, I will go ahead and start explaining the different abilities that he has for those not familiar with the character in League of Legends. So on Q, we have an ability called Mystic Shout, which fires a bolt straight forward and deals damage to the first thing it hits. Pretty standard fireball, gets a range, deals some damage. The added effect on this ability is actually that if it strikes an enemy unit, all of its cooldowns are reduced by 1 second. If you watch carefully on the Q ability itself, the cooldown actually jumps when it hits a target, and that's part of that effect. It also does change the other abilities' cooldowns, as you see like that. On W, we have Essence Flux, which is a fireball that has a shorter range and less speed than Mystic Shot, but it deals damage to all enemies that it passes through. It also has the added benefit of giving an attack speed boost to any allies that it hits. Hover over that so you can see the tooltip. And then on E, we have Arcane Shift. Arcane Shift lets Ezreal teleport forward a short distance, and then if he's close enough, it actually fires a missile to the nearest enemy target from where he lands. And lastly, his ultimate, True Shot Barrage. True Shot Barrage has Ezreal channel for 1 second, throwing a massive ball of acid forward, dealing damage to everything in its path. I know in League of Legends it's a giant wave of energy, but I couldn't find a good model for that, so I just made a giant ball of acid. The damage dealt by this is actually reduced by 10% for each target hit, with a minimum of 30% damage. And he also has a passive called Rising Spell Power. You don't see it anywhere because it's a hidden buff, but it'll show up when he actually starts hitting things with spells. And that actually increases his attack speed and damage every time he hits something with a spell. Again, in League of Legends it just increases his attack speed, but I added a damage component onto it so that it's a little bit more visible. It'll show up down here on his attack, weapon speed, and his damage. So let's go ahead and get into the mechanics. For Mystic Shot, I used a mover for the fireball, which terminates and deals damage when it collides with an enemy. To do the added effect of the cooldown reduction, I actually have it apply an invisible buff to Ezreal for 1/20th of a second, which increases his cooldown rate to 20 times the normal, which ends up resulting in 1 second being taken off all of his cooldowns. I tried messing with even shorter durations, but it got really wiggy, so like I set it to 1/100th of a second and 100 times, and it gave him no cooldown, so I set it to about 20th of a second. Figure that's a decent range. I also did find an interesting bug with that, though, in that if you hit something with it when something else is about to go off cooldown, it actually loops the cooldown bonus around to the next time it cast. As you see, it didn't start at the top, it started like right here. I'm not sure if this is something I did or if it's something with the ability or with the effect itself, but something that I had noticed when I was messing around with it. And so, on his next ability, Essence Flux, I created another missile, which terminates upon reaching the target point instead of upon collision. This is how it'll allow it to pass through multiple targets. I'm going to lose focus for just a second there. Alright, there we go. Actually passes through multiple targets. As you see here, passes through a bunch of things. I have the life bars turned on so you can actually see it dealing damage to everything. Where Mystic Shot only has one search area on the fireball, Essence Flux actually has two. The way that the hit detection works for fireballs is it actually searches on the ground where the fireball model is every, I think, 20th of a second for these, and then applies the effects. So for Essence Flux, it actually has two search area effects, one of them that deals the damage and one of them that actually applies the buff. If you see or see over here, it gives him an attack speed buff. This one only lasts for 3 seconds, whereas the passive, which you can see showing up here, lasts for 5 seconds. So this will fall off, and then 2 seconds later this will fall off. Like that. And also, another thing I had to do for this, to make sure that the fireball itself, because it's searching 20 times a second, doesn't repeatedly hit the same target, it also applies an invisible buff to anything that it hits, and then the search areas both use a validator to ignore any targets detected that have that buff on them. So it'll apply an Essence Flux buff to everything, which is invisible, you can't see it. But it also prevents the fireball from actually tagging things multiple times in a row. or with the same fireball. So his third ability, Arcane Shift, is a simple teleport command, which I just took straight from Blink because, you know, Stalkers. That's part of why I picked the Stalker model. Which, after it teleports, actually causes him to fire a missile at an enemy target within range. And I'll go ahead and show that up here. See, it does a little bit of damage. And so for this, I actually had to experiment with some different stuff and found that there's a section in the searches called Target Sort, and use the one called TS Distance. It actually sorts any targets that it detects and applies the effect to the nearest one, as opposed to, I'm not sure if it just does random ones or what, but that was the easiest way to let it select the closest target. So we see there, it actually goes to the middle one. If I go up here now, we'll go to that one. If I jump to the bottom, I'll go to that one. Lastly, the ultimate True Shot Barrage. This one was a fun ability to make. It has a 1 second charge up time, see like that, and it fires that giant ball of acid I was talking about. And it deals damage to everything in its path. Now, the way True Shot Barrage works is that it actually deals less damage to subsequent targets. So the first set of targets that it hits will take 100 damage, and then the next set will take 90, and this continues all the way down to 30 damage. The way I actually did this was when it did a search area for any given damage amount, let's say it starts with 100, it will check, and if it finds a target, it actually destroys the 100 search effect, the search persistent. And the final effect, or the effect when the ability is cancelled, or the effect is ended, is to apply the 90 search effect, or 90 search persistent, sorry. And so on down the line. So when the 90 is destroyed, it starts the 80 search persistent. When the 80 search persistent is destroyed, it goes on to 70, all the way down to the 30. And the 30 is the only one that doesn't self-terminate. The way that the 31 ends is when the fireball reaches its destination. It actually runs a script that checks for whatever stage it's on and destroys all of them in a line. So if it only hits one target like this, it would be stuck at 90. But as soon as that missile terminates, it then goes through and destroys the 100, then the 90, then the 80, and all the way down to the 30, and destroys that one as well. So everything is cleaned up nicely. Let's see here. And again, like Essence Flux, it applies an invisible buff to anything it touches to make sure that it doesn't get hit multiple times. That was an interesting thing that happened that ended up murdering millions and millions of roaches in testing. And then lastly, the passive itself, Rising Spell Power. I just have every damage instance and the attack speed buff from Essence Flux apply a stack of Rising Spell Power to Ezreal, with the stack maxing out at 5, and the refresh flag set so that it restarts the buff at maximum duration anytime a new stack is applied. So, as you can see, when one spell is cast, it applies 1 stack of the buff. There's 5 damage here, and the attack speed is modified by 0.13. And then if I do 2, it goes up to 10, and again, minus 25%. It's like 1.1% attack speed, and since 1.1 times 1.1 is bigger than 1.2, it adds up, and it's a small fraction. I don't know if there's a way to make it additive, so I just said it that way. It's a close enough approximation to prove the point. And then, as you'd expect with something that hits like 30 targets, this one just maxes out the stacks pretty much instantly, you know, again, depending on how many it hits. If it only hit 1 target, then it would only apply 1 stack, but something that hit 4, so, actually no, that one looks like it hit 5. Oh, that's right, because it hit, the initial one counts as hitting Ezreal, so. But yeah. And it actually does modify his attack speed. It's kind of hard to tell, but his attack speed does get a little bit faster as he gains stacks. And then as soon as it wears off, his attack speed is a lot slower. And yeah, I put a different effect on the Essence Flux because I thought it would be cool. So yeah, this is a fun little project that took a lot less time than I expected, since his abilities are pretty easy to break down into their component parts and the different ways they function, or the different aspects of how they function, you know. The teleport followed by a missile search, the missile that does both searches and applies both effects, the damage and the buff. So Now that this is done, I think I'm probably going to start on Annie next so I can learn how to make spawnable minions. Thanks for watching.